From the 2023 NFL Combine, this is Patriots Unfiltered.
All right, guys, it's Dussault and Lazar, and we are back again here on Friday from Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. Evan, today we heard from the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the tight ends. It's an exciting day. I mean, let's face it.
This is it.
The Patriots need a wide receiver. They could use a tight end long term. Some questions there as far as that goes, but saw a number of good players today, and we should tease too. We're going to focus here mostly on the wide receivers and tight ends. If you want to hear about quarterbacks, we had guest Mark Schofield from SB Nation come on. He is a quarterback guru. He knows everything about these guys. We talked to Mark about Mac Jones, about last year, about what he expects this year. A lot of great stuff. So if you want to hear about the quarterbacks, go on to the end. We're going to focus here though on the wide receivers and the tight ends. So Evan, what is your big, just overall takeaway today, starting with the wide receivers?
Well, first and foremost, I did an interview with Matt Groh, the Patriots director of player personnel. That's up on Patriots.com right now, and he said to me that with the playmaker positions, you either have to invest high draft capital or cap space in these guys. They don't come cheap anymore. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he said. And I think when you look at this draft, it's another draft where using a top 50 pick on a wide receiver or maybe a tight end, which we can get into here in a second as well, is where the Patriots are at. And I understand the optics of that for the Patriots and their history at that position, and maybe wanting to go through the veteran market. But we were talking about this off the air yesterday, trying to go through the options in the veteran market, and
nothing appealing.
There's nothing great unless one of these guys really comes available that a Jerry Jeudy or T. Higgins or somebody like that, because of contract negotiations. My guess would be why that would be the situation. But I don't think their teams currently, the Bengals and the Broncos, have big plans to move on from either one of those guys. So I could be wrong about that. It's not inside information. It's just the feeling after talking to them here the other day. So looking at this draft, I think you're looking at taking another stab at it, right? Throwing another dart. You got to. And I think at this point in time, I always compare this draft to the 2019 draft because more of the receiving talent that ended up panning out in the league went in the second and third rounds instead of the first round. But with this draft, I can promise you that a couple of these guys are going to pan out to being really good NFL players. That's just how it works, whether they're drafted in the top 10 or in the third round, right? Somebody is going to end up being the A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, D.K. Metcalf, Terry McLaurin of this draft. And eventually, the Patriots got to hit on one of these guys eventually.
You would think they need it. And so I want to start at the top. A guy that I think we, kind of agreement on, at least early, Quentin Johnston. Certainly a physical specimen. We saw him walking around, big guy, straight speed, outside receiver primarily. Not, I've been banging quickness inside. But an interesting day, I think, especially for you, getting to hear from him, getting to talk to him a little bit.
My mind's a little bit swayed. It's a little bit swayed, Eldrick. You'll be happy about that. I think the one thing that you can see with Quentin Johnston, let me start with why I wasn't high on him to begin with, and then we can kind of explain it from there. The two things that really show up on his film are, one, he's not a very good separator at the top of the route, at the break point. He's not somebody that's going to sink and then create separation like a Zay Flowers or a Jordan Addison might on a route going over the middle or something like that. So you're really talking about a linear athlete that operates on a vertical route tree. So we're talking about verticals, fades, posts, things like that, and then maybe like a hitch to keep defensive backs honest, right? And I think that the route tree that you look at, if you want to see a guy that's panned out in this mold, it's like a Des Bryant, right? Who ran literally 3 routes his entire career. It was a vertical, it was a slant, and it was a hitch. Like, those were the 3 routes he ran, but he was dominantly good at those 3 routes, and he was able to make up for it. I think DK Metcalf is another guy that's in a similar situation. So that's why I had some reservations about Quentin Johnston. There's also the issues with his hands. He's had some drops on his tape, and he's not at his height. He's 6'3", 6'4". This is not Devontae Parker. Like, it's not a contested catch receiver. He's more of a burner. Now, with all that being said, he was very, very impressive at the podium, which I thought was great. Very confident, but cool. Not like overconfident or cocky, but just a really good swagger about him. And I think the other thing is, you start to look at some of these guys in this draft. I think the one guy where I can say a defensive coordinator might lose some sleep at night thinking about the matchup against this guy, or they might have to leave that safety over the top and take him out of the middle of the field, or the guy that's going to impact teams the most from a game plan perspective. It's probably Johnston if he pans out in the NFL, because these other guys are more of the R type of guys, these separation, quick, twitchy slot receiver types that aren't necessarily going to demand double teams or extra attention or coverage being rotated over to them or whatever the case may be.
So the other three guys kind of next on the list. Zay Flowers, of course, we're familiar with him. Boston College, was at the Shrine Bowl. Patriots have plenty of contact with him out there as well. Jackson Smith-Njigba not going to run here at the Combine. We're kind of waiting to see tomorrow night exactly how he tests otherwise, see what he looks like on the field. Probably a little bit of a question mark for guys like us who are saying, hey, we just want to make sure someone comes through this door. He can run like the wind in terms of quickness and get open. And then the last one, Jordan Addison, who my guy, my first mock, questionable if that will remain. But overall, all three of those guys that can control the middle of the field, and it feels like that's something that would help Mac Jones. And I don't know what's going to happen with Jacoby Myers. That's certainly his area and where he kind of makes his living, but I don't see it as hard if you're going to let Jacoby Myers go cash in somewhere else, and then maybe you bring in one of these rookies and you say, hey, let's go plug him in the middle, develop a relationship with Mac Jones, and then those two guys are together for the next 2 to 3 years.
I'm really gravitating more and more towards Zay Flowers. I just feel like his game is exactly what the Patriots need for Mac Jones, and specifically, and Bill O'Brien, because Bill O'Brien talks about a lot with the middle of the field role that he likes out of the slot. He likes to put his quickest guy in that role, that Edelman, that Welker role. And right now, I love Jacoby Myers, but I don't necessarily think that that's his game. Like, I don't think he's really a true jitterbug like Zay Flowers is, whereas Zay can really get in and out of the break. He's got great electric quickness, and he's excellent after the catch. Just an explosive all-around player. Moves at a different speed than everybody else out on the field. And now that he's up to 180, 185, like he told us here today, and I also he doesn't shy away from things like, I think people were asking, why did you go to the Shrine Bowl instead of the Senior Bowl? And he said he wanted to be different. He wanted to stand out. Why, he's going to test completely here at the Combine, run the 40 jumps, agilities, on-field work, the whole 9 yards. I'm not saying JSN's ducking it a little bit, but I'm saying JSN might be ducking it a little bit because the 40 might not be very good for him. And I think that Zay Flowers, this whole entire process, has said, I'm a stud. I know I'm a stud. I'll run a 40. I'll play at the Shrine Bowl. I don't care. I'm going to be good.
I love that attitude, and that was kind of what the attitude Mac had when he came out, when he went from winning a national championship to going right to the Shrine Bowl, working out there. The Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
I got Senior and Shrine Bowl. I got to get these two straight. They're blending together here, folks.
They're both start with S. It's confusing.
And we're here, we've been at the Combine for we're day 5 now.
It's
all blending together.
But
hey, if there's anything though that can get us up, it's these wide receivers. And I think part of the excitement is, and I know there's been some reports. I think maybe Chad Graff from The Athletic reporting that the Patriots might choose not to use their 14th overall pick on one of these wide receivers, and instead might look to either free agency or maybe the later rounds. And I think we both agree, as always, and I say this, I feel like this is the 3rd or 4th year in a row that I've said this, that there are good players in day 2. There are starters in day 2, and maybe even into day 3. I think for me today, hearing some of these guys, I know we both really like Jaden Reed. I mean, if you watch any of the Senior Bowl practices, he had some amazing downfield catches. Really exciting guy. Guys like him, these second-level guys that I still think, even though they're not going to be the 14th overall pick, but somebody like him who, you're not waiting to get that 7th-round slot receiver that Perillo always makes fun of us for. Let's just find
Charlie
a slow
Jones.
guy.
Who
was
Jones.
here today as well.
That was mean.
But hey, let's get the day 2 slot guy. Let's get it. Yeah, maybe he's not as polished as some of these guys like Zay and Addison that we're talking about, but guys that just innately have that top half of the draft quickness to separate.
So the guy that really stood out to me is, along with Reed, who I think is more of a vertical slot. He's someone that's going to run a lot of slot fades or overs, deep crossers from the slot, things like that. Josh Downs from UNC, I had him in my mock draft to the Patriots at 46 in the 2nd round. He feels like a guy that is one of those jitterbug, quickness, good twitch, good ability after the catch, but also has some high IQ route running about him as well. And I asked him today, what's your favorite route? And he said the Edelman pivot route. He said,
it is.
I'm like, all right, well, this guy is a Patriot. He said something along the lines of, if you need a play, come to Josh Downs. I was like, all right, I like that swagger, that attitude. He's somebody that I think is going to be available I don't know if he's going to make it to 46. I do this every year. I always say, like, this guy might not make it, but I don't know if he's going to make it to 46. But I think he's someone that, if you're serious about this, and it's what they did with Taekwon last year. Remember trading up from 54 to 50? It wasn't a huge trade up, but they did. If you're serious about this, then moving up from 46 to 36, let's say, to secure Josh Downs at the beginning of the second round, that's something that I think that they should really entertain if they don't want to use the 14th overall pick on an Addison or on a Flowers.
It's funny with some of these guys, Evan, because I mean, I try to get a look at as many of them as I can and try to research, but inevitably you're not going to get a hand on everybody, or you're going to forget somebody. And then you get here and you happen to walk by a podium and you say, this guy, I don't remember seeing any film on him, but he sounds like a Patriot a little bit to me. Or, just his presence. It's like, this seems like a guy that would fit into that locker room. Marvin Mims was a guy I can't recall any tape I've watched of him, but I'm like, it sounds like Damian Harris up there. This is Damian,
right.
not quite as deep and sexy voice that Damian Harris has, but just that kind of serious tone to him.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing that I noticed with your guy you were just talking about, Downs, serious football guy, and that always kind of triggers me a little bit. I'm like, ooh, there might be something there.
So if you ask OU fans, Marvin Mims should have won the Blittenkoff last year.
Oh, yeah.
It went to Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. Mims is a vertical route runner as well as speed guy, kind of in that Reed mold from Michigan State, the guy we were just talking about from the Senior Bowl. He's got some really good film, though, and he had some really great production last year with the Sooners as well. So he's somebody that can certainly get up the field and has that ability to just stretch the defense from all three levels. And I really liked what I saw out of him, and I think that in some ways he's sort of the forgotten receiver of this class, because Addison had the big 2021. He wins the Blittenkoff at Pittsburgh, and then last year Hyatt wins the Blittenkoff at Tennessee, and Mims was just right there both times almost, and just didn't get over the hump to get into the actual winner's circle of that award. So it's a really interesting player. I actually think, for where they're going to be drafted, I would probably prefer Mims over Hyatt, honestly, because I think Hyatt's going to be overdrafted because of the speed, whereas Mims, I think, has in the ballpark speed as Jalen Hyatt, but has a little bit more film against press coverage and a little bit more film against NFL-style defense, whereas with Jalen Hyatt, you have the splits and you have the releases, and it's just all, smoke and mirrors there from Tennessee.
I saw a lot of Tyquan Thornton in him, but the guy I quick want to talk about is just the other Tennessee receiver, who was Cedric Tillman, who more productive, played this year, his last year, this year, played with a high ankle sprain. He talked about that a little bit. He's another one of those guys, and I mean, I brought up Garrett Williams from Syracuse coming off an ACL. Like, I always get intrigued by these guys who, maybe had a little bit down production in terms of dealing with an injury, but you look at his tape the year before, he's an explosive guy that you wonder where would he be being talked about if he was still that player.
If you're grading just off of film and you're evaluating just off of film and you're not looking at production and you're not looking at 40 times, Cedric Tillman's tape is better than Jalen Hyatt's tape. He's a more technically sound receiver. He's a better route runner. He has more tools in his bag. But because Jalen Hyatt has the production, that's the guy that Tennessee everybody talks about. Last year, one of the games he was healthy for was the Georgia game. Keely Ringo had all sorts of problems with this guy. He couldn't cover him because Keely Ringo has some stiffness in coverage and change of direction concerns, and Tillman would just get on that vertical and then just sit it down really quickly and stop down on hitches and things like that, and he would just Ringo bye-bye like up the field, and he would just lose him. And then he was pretty elusive and good with the football in his hands after the catch as well. So if I am going with that big body X receiver, obviously Quentin Johnston's one of one in that category, but I think Cedric Tillman would be the number 2 guy in that board for me that might be available more in like the top 75 picks instead of up in the first round.
All right, well, let's turn the page then to the tight ends, and again, go to the end. We'll talk about the quarterbacks. Great stuff with Mark Schofield. Tight ends, and Evan, I know you got a little enamored with Quentin Johnston. I think you got a little enamored with Michael Mayer as well, but we know Mayer is a well-rounded tight end. I mean, he's probably like the full package in terms of wide tight end. He can block. Is he a next generational kind of move guy? Maybe not. We'll see how he tests tomorrow night. But there are some of those move guys, and I have to admit I'm intrigued. go back to Aaron Hernandez. You know, you took Gronk and Aaron Hernandez together. They were a perfect complement. I think some people thought that's what you were getting with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. It hasn't quite worked out that way. So as intriguing as Michael Mayer is, as you know, that prototypical guy, there's also plenty of guys who are that F tight end and that, you know, that can be a move guy that, you know, again, it just for me, it goes back to creating mismatches in the middle of the field. And I see some of these guys, Luke Musgraves, Dalton Kincaid. I don't know, it's maybe a little bit too rich for their blood there in the first round or two. But it's not hard to envision a guy like that being a weapon for Bill O'Brien.
So I felt the same way about Quentin Johnston, and I felt the same way about Joey Porter Jr., and I felt the same way, I would say, also about Nolan Smith, who just put on an absolute show last night on the on-field workouts and athletic testing. A 4.39 at like 240 pounds is unfair. That's, you know, Captain America type stuff. So he was ridiculous. All three of those guys are the type of players that like are captains, longtime captains, CEOs of your franchise, those guys that you're going to put out and be faces of your organization. And Michael Mayer to me was exactly that. And I talked to him at the podium briefly, and then I tried to grab him off to the side as he was walking around going through all the big J media, trying to get him on TV and things like that. And just talking to him, I just went up to him. I was like, you know, I really enjoyed watching your film. You know, have you met with the Patriots, things like that. And he's just a great guy, you know, and intense, competitive, confident, and a leader. And you can tell that guys are going to gravitate towards him in a locker room and are really going to follow him when he pulls on that rope. And I think that's something that you have to think about in the first round. Like it's legit. You have to think about it in the first round that this is going to be a guy that's going to be front and center for your organization, hopefully for a very long time. And I think that Mayer really passed that test today.
It's a great point. I feel like if we were in 2005 or 2006, maybe back when like it was just a running joke that the Patriots always draft tight ends, like they just always need, like, I think if we were still in that headspace, I think it would be getting a lot more attention for Michael Mayer. But a couple other guys I just wanted to highlight. Darnell Washington from Georgia is a guy we were talking about prior to him getting up. Just a monster. You know, not going to be that dangerous move tight end, but if you want to talk about a dominant, big-bodied guy that you could stick next to a tackle and run a jumbo O-line package, he could do it. He's got a big scar on his face too. I mean, the guy just looks like a baller. But one more guy I want to highlight, and unfortunately, you know, I'm a Holy Cross guy. They lost to South Dakota State in the FCS semifinals, but Tucker Kraft, I just really enjoyed listening to him. He was from a small town. He said, you know, his whole K through 12 is all together. There were like 20 kids in his graduating class, and you know, people are, hey, how would you feel about going to Tampa Bay? And he's like, honestly, I go anywhere. I just am looking forward to getting out of South Dakota. He's been there for his whole life. But you know, just a couple examples, and one more I'll tee up for you was Cameron Latu that we were there for with Alabama, and you asked him about Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, I was asking him about Bill O'Brien. He had some good things to say. I think the best thing for a Patriots fan, at least from my perspective, that he said about Bill O'Brien was that Bill O'Brien knew his strengths and weaknesses and knew how to use them, which I think is going to be really, those words like really resonated with me, that he said that every time he was asked to do something, it was something that he felt comfortable with, that he was good at, and that was going to amplify his skill. But you mentioned Darnell Washington. He called himself the most unique tight end in this draft. He wouldn't say he's the best tight end. He says the most unique tight end.
I'd agree with that.
And I'd agree with that. Yeah. And I think if you look at what the Patriots might morph into, it's not exactly what they were the first time around with Bill O'Brien, where it was a lot of pace and space and shotgun and things like that. But a lot of us were clamoring for more play action last year. And if you start to be a run-heavy, play-action-heavy type of offense, maybe moving forward, and now you have basically a sixth offensive lineman on the field that once you run that play-action fake and you get those linebackers stepping up, he can sneak behind somebody up the seam or something like that. He has that ability about him to run the seam, to adjust the balls in the air and make catches outside of his frame with his length and his size, and then rumble after the catch. Like, he's got that Gronkowski bounce off of me type of yak ability, and that fits really well with like an under center play action downhill run offense, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they go. I also wouldn't be surprised if it's the total opposite, but I feel like that is a possibility, at least, that's the type of offense they run.
All right, now we're going to take a quick cut over to our interview with Mark Schofield of SB Nation, and we're going to talk some quarterbacks. All right, we're excited to be joined now by Mark Schofield of SB Nation. If you guys don't know him, he is a quarterback guru. He knows everything there is to know about quarterbacks and the draft classes. I was happy to run across him here at the Combine, as we usually do. Had to have him come on, talk about this class,
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about Mac as well. I know Evan is familiar with him. Mark, thank you for coming on. How are you doing here at your combine week? I know you just got in last night, right?
I did get in. I got in Thursday morning. It's strange the way the schedule was set up this year because they had the general managers, head coaches early in the week. Usually like to see that, but we got quarterbacks thrown on Saturday, and that's what I do. That's what I love. So I wanted to make sure I could be here for that. So I came in Thursday morning, which is probably physically for the best because Combine Week tends to be a bit long.
Look at us.
People are running on fumes right now, so I've still got a little bit of get up and go left. I don't know how long that's going to last. It's raining here in Indy today on Thursday, so that's taking a lot out of us, but it is great to be here. It's great to see you guys. Always fun to catch up, on air, off air, and I'm really excited to be here.
One of these days, I'm going to publish some of our DMs together, Mark, because it's just me being like, am I right about this, or am I seeing this correctly? Or...
And 99% of the time, you're absolutely seeing it.
You're too kind. No, back and forth about quarterbacks with you all the time, and I'm always like, is his foot like a little bit off here? What's going on? We went as deep as like Tyree Jackson, I think you and I have discussed before, and all the way down the rabbit hole we go. But I think to start, we'll get into the draft in a second, but I would love your opinion on Mac last season and what you saw from him that led to the regression from a quarterbacking standpoint, not just a coaching standpoint, but some of the mechanical things or the processing things.
Yeah, I mean, we know the coaching stuff. We know the scheme stuff, and that's sort of been talked about. And I could go 20 minutes on run more play action. I mean, we could go down that road. But I think sort of mechanically, structurally, there were some lower body inconsistencies from Mac Jones last year that we hadn't really seen before. This is part of what you and I were DMing about. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that front foot wasn't where it needed to be, or the hallway, like we say, with the hips weren't set the right way to get him in a position to make a good throw downfield, whether it's intermediate, deep, boundary, wherever. And so I think that's part of what he faces this offseason, is to reset him from a mechanical standpoint, particularly in the lower half. That was not an issue coming out of Alabama. I mean, coming out of Alabama, he was fairly clean mechanically, whether it was protection up front, trying to get through reads quicker, trying to speed himself up for one reason or another. That sort of took a step back, and I think that's part of the process. We can certainly talk about the conceptual stuff, the schemes, the designs, the play calling, but from a get the ball where it needs to be their perspective, that's one of the biggest things he's facing this offseason.
And so when you look at Bill O'Brien coming back to the Patriots this year, knowing what you know about him, what's kind of your expectation in terms of how are Mac Jones's game, Bill O'Brien's offense, his philosophies going to mesh this year?
I'm pretty optimistic about what this is going to look like next year, and part of that is if you sort of watch Bill O'Brien and his offensive philosophy, he molds it to his talent. He molds it to the quarterback that he has. I mean, obviously he had somebody that we just heard from this morning in Bryce Young, and the way he was able to mold and shape that offense and what Bryce Young likes to do, spread it out, get the ball out quickly, things like that. And some of the other things he's done over his various coaching stops for different types of quarterbacks, that tells me that they're going to figure out over the course of these next couple of months where Mac Jones needs to be, where he's most comfortable, and that's what the offense is going to look like. So, I mean, I could tell you, what it should look like, what it might look like. They're going to figure that out. They're going to figure out what it looks like and best in Mac Jones's hands, and that's the biggest part of this because, now Mac Jones is going to be, in a way, third offense in 3 years. That's not always conducive to quarterback development. So now the process becomes, where do you take this offense? How do you construct it in a way that Mac Jones wants it? Because that's what the focus should be. Now, we used to live in a world where like the best receiver is the open receiver and all that fun stuff. No, let's find out what Mac Jones wants to do. Where's he comfortable? What designs does he want to run? Put it in his hands. If it works, that's what we want. If it doesn't, now you've got your answer after year 3 of the Mac Jones experiment.
Let me ask a quick follow-up, Evan. Just in terms of the guys that are here, wide receivers, tight ends, we've talked a lot about we think they need weapons. For you, is there a particular, and it doesn't even have to be a specific player, maybe it is, but just a style of player or a style of weapon, or what do you think they need to put around Mac to do what you're saying, to play to those strengths? We talk a lot about quickness.
There are 2 guys that come to mind immediately. Quentin Johnston from TCU, Zay Flowers from Boston College. And what I look for are guys that can create up to the catch point and then after the catch. Because I think some of the times we saw Mac most comfortable was when they were sort of spreading things out, let him get the ball out of his hands quickly to guys that create after the catch, that can create in space. And those are 2 guys that can certainly do that, can do it at a high level. And so whether it's at 14, which is probably you're going to have to do it with one of those guys or a trade back, Those are two players that I really have in mind, but it's really that ability to create before the catch point, release packages, separation, make life a little bit easier on Mac Jones, which is what those guys can do, and then after the catch, creating with yards after the catch is where this offense has been historically. That's what they need in this offense. Whether they bring Parker back, whether they bring Myers back, either way, having a player like that will be huge for this offense next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing I wanted to ask you about with Mac, and then I think we can move more onto the draft prospect, but out of structure playmaking and out of the pocket playmaking is something that is getting really popular around the league, and I think this is a big question mark that people have with the future with Mac Jones. Is he's not one of these Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen type of athletes that gets outside the pocket. I guess it's a two-pronged question. One, how much do you think that actually matters to quarterback play in the league right now? And two, do you think that is something that he could improve on and become better at outside the pocket, out of structure type of stuff?
Yeah, I think it does matter because it gets to the idea of football as problem solving, right? And if you've got multiple ways on a down-to-down basis to solve problems as a quarterback, whether it's with your mind, whether it's with your arm and velocity, or create it as a secondary reaction player where, okay, we got a free rusher off the left edge, I could spin away from that and create off of structure outside the pocket. The more ways you can solve a problem as a quarterback, the better the offense is going to be. If you're only going to be able to solve it with your mind and your arm, and you're dead to rights when you get that free rusher, defenses will be able to take advantage of that. Now, can Mac do that? I think so. As a rookie, I thought he showed a little bit more athleticism than perhaps we gave him credit for, and than perhaps I gave him credit for coming out of Alabama. But his next evolution in this process is to be ahead of things with his mind. And I know you, Evan, you and I talked about this a little bit going into his year two, was pre-snap pressure identification, okay? Can you get a better idea before that snap of where that pressure is coming from? If you think back to his college days, he had a play against Notre Dame in their playoff game where he saw that blitz coming pre-snap and Evan, you and I talked about this a lot, and spun away from it because he was ahead of it with his mind. If he can get to that level in the NFL, he'll be able to create some of these sort of outside the pocket, off of structure moments. He's never going to be, a Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, but if he can get ahead of things with his mind, he can be a Ryan Tannehill type who, okay, he's not going to create as an athlete or be an explosive ball carrier, but he can get ahead of things with his mind, beat defenses with mind, and put himself then physically post-snap in a position to do that.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is that people always get caught up in out of structure bombs down the field, right? And it doesn't always have to be that. I remember he made a play against Baltimore last year where he scrambled out on 4th down and was able to just find somebody right past the sticks for like a 4 or 5 yard gain, which still added something to what they were doing. It wasn't necessarily a Josh Allen, 75-yard piss missile. It was something a little bit different, and I think that that's okay. Like, we don't have to
sometimes you just got to get to the next play, and we get so caught up, and I was having this conversation this morning, Evan, we get so caught up in like, explosive plays, and you do have to generate those as an offense. But sometimes you just got to get to the fresh set of downs. And that play you referenced, Evan, like, yes, would it have been awesome if he then throws across his body 35 yards downfield to the opposite hash? Yeah, we'd all be losing our minds, rightfully so. But sometimes it's just as important to Jacoby Myers is at the 5 yards downfield. It's 4th and 4. Let's get to first down because now the playbook's open. We're still on the field. We're not sending out the punt team. We're not sending out the defense again. And so, sometimes being a quarterback that can create outside of the pocket off of structure is just, can you get us another set of downs?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we saw the quarterbacks today. I know this is your thing, Mark. That's why you're here. I'll just tee it up for you. General thoughts on the class. I mean, we know Bryce Young. We know C.J. Stroud. We got to look at Anthony Richardson, who looks like he was sculpted in a lab. No reports that the Patriots actually met with him. What are your thoughts, and what are you looking for here over these next couple of days with these guys?
It's a very interesting class, Mike. I'm very excited about this group, and it's really, I've used this phrase a couple of times, it's a pick your poison quarterback class. Like, you could tell me of these 4 guys that we're all sort of talking about at the top, whether it's Levis, Richardson, Stroud, Young. You could tell me any one of those is your QB1. I might not agree myself, but I could see a case for it. Even Levis, who most people have.
You don't believe that about Levis.
Here's the thing with Will Levis, and this is I've used this sort of hypothetical a lot. If he goes to Carolina at 9, it could work, right? Because they have put so much around that quarterback position, whether it's Frank Reich, who's got a record of quarterback development dating back to Philadelphia and his first run with Carson Wentz, Josh McCown, who was basically like a coach/player with the Jets and Sam Darnold. Like, they've put a lot structurally around the quarterback position where I could talk myself into it working with Will Levis. But look, the three that excite me the most, it's Stroud, it's Young, it's Richardson. I think everybody that's going to be in Lucas Oil on Saturday to watch Richardson throw and work out, we might see a show, because he might throw some incredible throws during his throwing session and then run a 4-4. And then it becomes, that could be something special. We could leave Indianapolis saying, he's the first player drafted.
Yeah.
It's possible.
We were talking about, Mike, you just mentioned that the Patriots did meet with Anthony Richardson. It's a little bit interesting. I think we were talking about maybe them doing some due diligence on him against the Jets draft him or the Raiders draft him or something like that ahead of them on the draft board. But what I have found fascinating about his film, I've only watched like 1 or 2 games because I don't think they're going to draft him, but regardless, is that it doesn't seem to be about his eyes or where he's looking or processing. It's mechanical, and that is why I think so many people, us in the media and teams, are saying this guy's fixable. Like, you can get this guy there because it's not about what's between the ears. It's just that his feet are a little bit wacky sometimes. His mechanics are a little bit off.
Yeah, I think his eyes are, for the most part, where they need to be on a given play. I mean, you watch that Florida State game. He had a touchdown to Pearsall up the right seam on a post route where he's looking him off, looking that post safety in the middle of the field off, and then comes back on time in rhythm and throws an absolute strike. And it's like, it's a put the pen down moment, right? Like, I don't need to see anything else. And if you add the 4-4, if you add the run against LSU, the pocket movement against Tennessee, all the clips that get, posted on Twitter day in and day out, there's potential there for him to be very special. But you're right, Evan, the eyes for the most part are where they need to be. It's just getting the feet to match the eyes. And I think, you hear the phrase, he's raw, he needs 2 years. No, he just needs reps. Yeah. I think he could play as a rookie and play very well.
Yeah.
What else are you looking at be lower down? I mean, we know we talked a little bit to Dorian Thompson-Robinson today, who they coached at the Shrine Bowl, had a lot of great things to say just about the Patriots staff. Not a huge need, of course, for the Patriots, but I mean, I'm in the business. I'm sure you're in the same. It's always good business to have quarterbacks in the pipeline. Loved taking Zappy last year. It doesn't necessarily have to be a referendum on your starter, maybe a little bit, but not necessarily. Who are the guys, maybe day 2, day 3, maybe that you might like to just take a flyer on?
Yeah, Mike, I think I don't want to say the more interesting question is who is QB5, but it's a very interesting question because we're all sort of coalesced around the top 4. Who's the next quarterback? Hendon Hooker, very interesting, put up huge numbers this year, but you've got some question marks about the offense that he ran and how translatable that is. Obviously the age, the knee injury. I think there are things you could say about all of those. The offense could translate. You could run some of those concepts. The knee, he's almost ready to throw. I mean, ACL injuries aren't what they were a couple of years ago. The age, quarterbacks are playing earlier in their career, so it's not the detriment it used to be when you'd hold a clipboard for 3 years before you saw the field. I'm very intrigued by Jake Haener. He was somebody that was really fun to watch these past couple of years. Tough, competitive, had an injury against UCLA 2 years ago, but finished that game, got a big win. This year he had the lower body injury against USC, but came back well ahead of schedule, played in the Mountain West Championship game. Another quarterback that I'm intrigued by is Tanner McKee from Stanford. I wonder if he's sort of behind the times a bit, Joe Flacco. It's like, if this were 2005, he might be in the mix for QB1, but it's not. So now he's probably a day 3 guy. DTR is fascinating. Incredibly athletic. That Chip Kelly offense did a lot to stress defenses, both in the run game and the pass game. Made some impressive throws. Obviously an athlete, and with the way the game is trending, like we just talked about, with creating off of structure and outside the pocket, if you want to take a flyer on a quarterback on day 3, somebody you've now got experience coaching, and you know how they take to coaching, which is, whenever we talk about Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, people get caught up in the game itself or how they look in drills. The teams want to see if you take to coaching. If you told them something Monday in practice, do you run it the next day or not? Patriots got a good look at that with DTR, and if they came away liking what they saw, it wouldn't surprise me if they draft him on day 3.
What about Jaren Hall from BYU?
I had high expectations coming into this season. I think he sort of had a down week, in his sort of Senior Bowl experience. What I like about him is pocket movement and pocket poise. There are some plays he had this year at BYU where I remember one play, I forget who it was against, but There's pressure off the left edge, and he doesn't even drop his eyes for a second, even though it's right in his blind side. He just feels it and moves around. He had some throws against Notre Dame. Now, there was a situational awareness sack against Notre Dame where he gave up a safety, but there are some other moments in that game where he's just almost impervious to pressure, and that's something you can't teach. And you're going to face a lot of pressure playing quarterback in the NFL. And so I think, again, if you get into that sort of, round 4, round 5, round 6 range, I'm with you, Mike. You should always be looking to upgrade the quarterback room overall, whether it's as a starter, somebody to push the starter, or even somebody to push QB2. Because if number 1 goes down, you better have a good answer at number 2. Otherwise, you're wasting weeks in the NFL. And we don't like wasting weeks in the NFL here on the New England Patriots, right?
All right. Well, I don't want to end it before you get a last chance, Evan. Did you get everything off your chest here? You're gonna have to take the DMs later to get.
There's a big one that I do want to ask you about, and I think this is a really popular conversation. It's a popular take in Boston right now that the Patriots should follow the model that the Eagles followed by hedging their bets with Carson Wentz with Jalen Hurts, right? And making sure that you have somebody like that. And I think the only guy in this draft that fits that is Hendon Hooker. Like, I can't really think of anybody else that does, but I have reservations about, okay, now as a guy coming off an ACL who's already an older prospect, and Mac Jones only in year 3. Carson Wentz was year 5 when they did that in Philadelphia. It's a much different situation, but what are your opinions on Hooker? And a lot of people I've heard have said if he didn't have a torn ACL, we might be talking about him in the first round. I don't know if you're that high on it.
I'm not that high on him, but I do understand the allure, obviously the production. That offense, though, how much of that is translatable? Because they had those wide splits, a lot of stacks concepts.
That's why I don't like Jalen Hyatt.
A lot of switch concepts. I mean,
Sorry,
Hyatt, it's a limited route tree, but 4-2 is 4-2. Right. I mean, there's also that aspect to it. I think the conversation with Hooker that's fascinating, and again, is sort of like you got to the age thing. Now, there are ways where you could say, look, it's not an issue, but in New England, if you might give Mac another year or 2, then you're talking 2 more years before Hooker sees the field. It's a different conversation.
Right.
I think, look, this is a copycat sport. It's a copycat league. People say, oh, the Eagles just made a run. Look at how they structured it. We should do what they did. Let's also remember, this time last year, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni was standing at the podium in the next room saying, yeah, we believe in Jalen Hurts. We're going to build around him, as they were calling around about Russell Wilson. They also acquired a future first-round pick in this year's draft in case it didn't work out with Jalen Hurts. They can hedge their bets differently than New England Patriots can. They could acquire future draft capital. They could give Bailey Zappi a shot if it doesn't work out this year with Mac Jones. Now, I think next year is probably the draft if it doesn't work out with Mac this year, where you might see them try to move up to perhaps Drake May, Caleb Williams, something like that. It might be cost prohibitive to do so, but I think that's probably the Mac Jones gets this year to sort of figure it out. It's year 3. Let's take the step with Bill O'Brien. If it doesn't, we got to explore some options in 24.
Yeah, that Drake May kid's good.
He's very good. It could be a fun
we
class.
all know about
next year.
Caleb Williams just won the Heisman, but
Yeah.
Whoa. Let's
Mike
not get ahead of
Penix Jr.
ourselves.
too.
I can't. We're not even through this combine yet, you
But
guys.
we do this every year, Mike. Right? It's like, well, this group's
But next
good.
year.
Next year could be
I mean,
special.
you watch, Josh Downs, who I think is a really nice fit for the Patriots in the slot. And I'm texting my podcast co-host Alex Barth. We text all the time about prospects, and I'm like, he knows way more about college football than me. So I'm texting him like, who's this quarterback that UNC has? Guys like throwing off platforms.
I was talking to a UNC coach yesterday, and I was just like casually speaking. So who's already come around looking for Drake May? It's like all 32 teams.
Yeah.
So let's put it that way.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
very excited.
Well, and now we're on to the 2024.
I know, that's what I was going to say. And Mark will be back next year at the Scouting Combine. We'll have him back on. So Mark, thank you, so much for taking some time, giving your, your knowledge as you do on Twitter as well. And as you guys can tell, give him a follow at Mark Schofield, SB Nation. Read all his stuff. If quarterback becomes a need anytime in the future, certainly he's the guy to hit up. So Mark, thanks for joining us.
Guys, thanks so much for having me. Always a blast.
All right, that'll do it for Lazar and Deuce on Friday from the Combine. One more day to go, and I got to admit, I still got some energy. I'm still excited to see some of these offensive linemen tomorrow. Finally, get a look at them. It's probably going to be a little bit more subdued than it was here today with all the quarterbacks going. Anything you just want to tee up for tomorrow?
Skoronski. It's Skoronski time, baby. It's Skoronski time. No, in all seriousness, though, I was talking to a lot of the edge defenders the other day when we had them available, and there were just every single guy you asked had a different answer for who the best tackle that they faced was, which to me speaks to the depth of the class. Some guys are saying Anton Harrison, some guys are saying Skoronski. Will Anderson said Darnell Wright from Tennessee. So that's
seems like a riser, Darnell Wright.
Oh,
a lot more mention of him in the last couple of days.
He's one of my guys in this draft too. So you look at some of these players at tackle. I think they're going to have a ton of options, and you're going to have somebody available in the first 2 rounds that you will probably feel good about starting right out of the gate as a rookie, which I think the Patriots could really use.
All right, guys, keep an eye out for more content rolling in tomorrow, Saturday. Afterwards is a travel day for us, so it might be a little late coming in, but Monday, Tuesday, look, we're going to fire out everything, recaps, videos. You guys know how we do it here. It's been a great weekend. We're looking forward